Hi everyone, it's John Ayres from Harvey Thomas here once again. Welcome to our next session on improving sales performance. Today's topic is sales process, and I'm very happy to welcome Wayne from Zeka back again. Morning, Wayne.
Good morning, John. Good morning. Good to see you again. Morning, everybody. So as John said, we wanted to touch on sales process. What I wanted to call out though is that we're not talking about sales process in the sense of the mechanical design of the steps that your sales team should follow, but in common with the other sessions that we've done, we want to focus on that early stage in the life of a business, and in particular, the evolution of the sales engine. So acknowledging that any conversation about a sales engine will need to reference sales process design, and nobody would argue against the implementation of a sales process, but this is about the why of a sales process and the role of the CEO in ensuring that the exercise supports continued sales creativity and doesn't simply become an admin feature following a textbook. So for context, you've had some wins, customers are paying, that's great. There's energy in the business, individual brilliance comes to the fore, we celebrate agility. So why then would we think about changing that? Well, the reality is we're not. The vision is to create the conditions for the brilliance of the team to be more relevant, easier to surface, more often. But the reality is that we are moving quickly and the context changes for what that takes and who needs to be involved. So when we're in search phase, we would expect to see a high level of individual ownership. We may be founder or CEO led in sales. So the activity will be led from the top. We will know the right language. There will be very little debate because we're loving the momentum. And we'll typically be customer led. You know, at that stage in our life, we want to acquire logos. We need to get money. So we will pursue sales cycles. We may not be that diligent in reviewing the things that aren't working. It's everybody face forward. As we add more customers, what we see is increasing volumes of activity, increased complexity. There may be an aspect of second album syndrome. So we spent a long period of time getting the first bit right, but then our sponsors will expect to see the next successes rapidly. Step and repeat. You've done it once, do it 100 times. I'm guessing we all agree it's not that easy, which is why you're here today. There is, in fact, a bigger aspect of jeopardy here, because as we grow, we also risk creating multiple propositions for multiple customers, because we've still got that same agile mindset. We are still likely to be led from the top. So there won't be much dissent. There might be a desire to be organized. We will use a lot of the right language, but probably in the wrong way. We will start using the term MVP to justify selling anything. These are yellow alarms when it comes to sales process. It's also the case that as we grow, we'll be managing competing priorities, typically with limited resources. We'll never have enough resources, and we will be time poor. There's no doubt about that. We all experience that. But at the same time, we are attempting to industrialize the business and within it, our sales process. So through all of this, we're still desperate to feed the energy and the creative forces that got us this far. We don't want to lose that. We will be adding new people. That's a challenge. We will be finding other ways to do things. We will be receiving more instructions from customers. So against this backdrop, the sales process that we design could be the motorway to growth, but it could also be that A road or the mud track along which we're trying to scale creativity. I know John's not sure about that analogy, but hold that thought. If we buy into the analogy, then the CEO is the Minister for Highways and Byways. I think there we do end the analogy, because we all drive on the roads in Britain today, and yeah, we see more cones than anything else. So let's consider what we mean by creativity in a sales context, because the language is somewhat hypnotic. It's quite easy. In my mind, these are the elements of a sales campaign where there is the opportunity to respond to scenarios with actions and behaviors that can provoke attention, create a level of differentiation, or simply jolt the customer into a new line of thinking. We talk about qualification, messaging, the way we pitch, the way we surface customer problems, the way we negotiate. There are aspects of these things that will be formulaic, but ultimately what we want is for the fundamentals to be clear, the methodologies to be clear, accountabilities to be clear, in order that we can be appropriately systematic, but give ourselves a process that enables a shot at repeating best practice. So from a sales point of view, we don't want to build a team of lone wolves. We don't want to be managing multiple scenarios for the same event. And we don't want a discontinuous sales process that ultimately will be driven by force of personality or our view of the size of the opportunity. We want the guide rails to be clear. We want the tools to be available, right place, right time, but allowing the salesperson to navigate the opportunities and challenges that sit in front of them with whatever their version of creativity it takes to make it personal, authentic, all of these great words that are out there in the narrative today, but all too often mean very little. So the contention is that a well-designed and operated sales process allows more room for those moments to occur more often. That's the contention. There are some obvious benefits for key stakeholders. From a CEO's point of view, they get to gain a lot from this initiative, which is why we're focusing on their involvement. All too often, what I see on projects is that the CEO will be definitely time poor. They will have some big KPIs that they need to work to, and they will hand off this exercise as being part of someone's day job. But it is way more important than that. I read yesterday, Investopedia, who some of you might know, they captured some studies that suggest that 45% of company performance is influenced by the actions and behaviors of the CEO, and that 15% of the variance in profitability is influenced by the actions and decisions of the CEO. Those are quite stark numbers, and they're probably the numbers that the CEO will have at the top of their daybook. But we need to look at the leading indicators and the forward-looking activities that create the conditions for those outcomes to be affected. So while the CEO is going to be driven by people, numbers, culture, if we drill down into that, we're thinking about talent management, staff retention, sales forecasting, profitability, getting paid. We're looking at innovation, alignment to strategy. All of those topics are influenced by the validity of the sales process. the degree to which it drives creativity, it enables salespeople to go do the job that you're paying them to do. They're all tied in together. And I've called out here a view that sits above the day-to-day operation of a sales process, and called out why the CEO should care. So that increased ability to manage performance, take a view on resource management. And one that I've called out there, evidence the robust sales engine. When it comes time to start discussing the next round of funding, one of the things that investors look to nowadays, particularly in that growth phase, is, have you created the conditions for growth? If an investor looks at your sales process and thinks, what is that? How do I know where we are or what's going to happen next? They're going to be asking questions. It will be one point in a big conversation, but that ability to evidence the sales engine as being capable of supporting growth, continued growth, is going to be part of the conversation. So the CEO should care. It's also likely to be the CEO, by the way, who knows all of the moving parts and why they move in the way that they do. So their ability to tune the sales process should not be underestimated. Of course, much of the impact of sales process is realized through robust definitions of the process, but also the procedures that are part of the operation. That comes much closer to the shop floor. So sales leadership, for example, they need to be able to model what success will look like and have the sales process reflect that model to win. And we'll come back to that. Equally, exposing landmines. They need to be able to identify where are the yellow alarms, let alone the red ones, that are diluting the quality of the pipeline. Where are they? Where are the coaching opportunities? And how do I use the pipeline to identify them or validate my instinct? Let's not underestimate the role that instinct plays in these decisions. And then for salespeople as well, as resistant as salespeople are going to be, the opportunity to evidence the tools and content that is needed, the diligence that they can apply independently to qualify opportunities and the time that they spend on them. These factors all influence where, how we are creative and the time available to be creative. If the pipeline is diluted and we're chasing poor quality opportunities, we are not going to be creative. We might be random, we might be panicked, we might be working all hours. None of that is creativity. So we need that discipline from the beginning in order to apply the right activities to get qualified outcomes. If the engagement process is hazy or dependent on random sound bites or simply not governed, then the quality of data that it produces will be diluted at best. And so too will be the decision-making that follows. Initially, around resourcing, direction, strategy, product, but later on about jobs and the behaviors of the leadership team. So everybody should care about the impact the sales process has, and the CEO should be taking individual responsibility for making sure that it is tuned to do the job that the business needs. So we are not using the time here to talk to how you create a sales process in any detail. But what I did want to do was touch briefly on the building blocks, because the building blocks are necessary to allow us to identify how we support creativity. So our assumption here is that we know our ideal prospect, we know there is a market, and we understand the problems that we can most profitably solve for the highest benefit, the highest return for the customer. So what we're doing then is understanding the behaviors of the prospect, organizing our themes such that we can get a view on what we are doing, where and why. And at this stage, at the beginning, we have a very clear objective, which is to build this series of repeatable steps. But at this stage, it might well be a sketch, because we're thinking about what happens when and why. It might be scaffold, as in you need to do this and nothing else will happen unless you do. But at the stage of the life of the business we're talking about, it's more likely to be skeleton. This is what great looks like, and we're going to work together through these stages. And maybe there'll be a high degree of judgment, but that's okay, providing we know that's what it is. I should be clear here that these are entirely vanilla examples at 30,000 feet. In no way am I suggesting this is the answer, because each of you will have individual businesses, individual customer profiles, and nuances within the industry that you operate. So nobody here should be either hoping or pretending that this is a single answer to the question. So we would work through these thought processes, capturing the headlines of the engagement, capturing the stage profile, headings, purpose, activities. And what we're trying to do is to design our stages offset to the customer activity to give us the chance to intercept and influence how they are thinking, assumptions they're making, and actions they're taking. The CEO will be contributing to this. They are likely to have held more sales calls or customer calls than anybody else in the business. They must be engaged. They're also likely to have been in receipt of more views from industry experts than anybody else in the business. So we'll have a view on where the customer is going and why. All important inputs. So they should be making sure that they're getting from this what they need to get. We would then be looking at outcomes that we would expect from each of the stages and the assets that are needed, templates, content, video, social media outputs, whatever it might be. It'll be different for each of you. In order that we have this picture of what great looks like, and if I overlay the sales process stages to this, it helps us to be confident that as we progress through that process, we have good reason to believe that, yes, now is the moment where we are ready to deliver a proposal that the customer is ready to receive. That's a genuine stage in this relationship. Now, this already starts to feel like a level of complexity, but that level is up to you. As I described, it could be skeleton, it could be scaffold, it could be a sketch. I would hope that everything is documented, because remember, as you grow, you will be adding new people. So this also becomes part of the onboarding process. That's very important. Hopefully you can imagine how this would help accelerate the ramp of a new joiner if they know what these stages look like, what happens, who does it, why. That ramp will be faster. So we should know what it means to go through each of the stage gates. What we would then do, or could do, is add a version of a RACI, not intended to be a technical RACI. So I'm not looking for a debate about the meaning of RACI. What we're trying to do is to identify who is responsible, who is accountable. As we become more mature, we would line up job descriptions behind this. And the detail, it may reflect a level of iterations. It probably won't happen all at once. But the level of engineering should be enough to make it possible for creativity to flourish, because I'm arguing that the architecting of these guide rails to whatever level is appropriate means that the right things happen at the right time, in the right place, in front of the customer, so salespeople can focus on their activities and skills to influence what the customer is doing and thinking. The concept is straightforward. I recognize that we will be constrained by time and resource, although I would also take this opportunity to point out that there are people out there who you can engage to come and help do this, validate this, add that additional resource to get the job done. So rigor is important. Whether or not it looks like a RACI or gets that far, but the way in which this is done and the outcomes that are delivered should be underlined in the CEO daybook. This is the 30,000-foot view they should have, not to design a RACI or design the outcomes. You do not want the CEO doing that. But the CEO's sponsorship is fundamental to having the sales team adopt a sales process and the CRM activity that follows. So I'm absolutely not advocating that the CEO is in the detail, but I am advocating that the CEO should make it their responsibility to ensure that it is done. If it isn't done, and if we're not shining a light on these topics, then we are taking a robust view of sales admin and nothing more. And the application of these disciplines in that foundational activity and the operation of the sales process is what allows creativity to flourish without building a team of uncontrollable mavericks. So the CEO should be shining a light on our stakeholders working together, specifically in the design of the sales process and the procedures that allow it to operate. Can the CEO believe that the process is trusted by the team and stakeholders to make it easier to sell profitably? If the team don't believe that they can sell more, deliver more profit, and ultimately get paid more, then adoption is going to be simply about governance. They're not going to believe in the process. Part of that will also be about the resourcing of the activities. So the CEO needs to believe and articulate the degree to which the stages are resourced. So that might be resource itself, people. It might be specific accountability, which in turn might require some bravery to say that we're not going to do these things because we're prioritizing, for example, lead gen. Quite often in a growth phase, there will be a trade-off between corporate marketing and growth marketing, lead gen. There is a trade-off. There is not a bottomless pit of money. No marketer I've ever spoken to has said, geez, I've got all this money and I don't know what to do with it. But from a sales process point of view, there needs to be common agreement that we all recognize how enough high quality leads can land in the funnel to serve that process going forward. As one example, it's not the only example. Once something is sold, how do we resource onboarding? That will be another topic. That needs to be resourced as well. And again, resourcing. Is that people? Is that money? Is that training? Is that tech? There might be some tech aspect of how a customer is onboarded. The CEO needs to have control of that conversation in order to make this a worthwhile activity. The same dynamic applies to making it easier for the customer to buy. The customer is a stakeholder in your sales process. Ignore that, and it is, again, simply internal admin. Perhaps the single biggest topic is going to be around qualification. The diligent application of qualification throughout the process, because if we allow low quality opportunities to progress, either because we're not very good at it or because the numbers pressure means we want to show a big pipeline, we all know the dynamics. If we allow that to happen, salespeople will be super busy, but they are not going to be creative because they'll be spending their time cranking handles, hoping that enough will flow through. I guess there's a trade-off. Maybe in some businesses, it is simply a numbers game. But if scaling matters and the behaviors, the activities of the salespeople are the main factor in growth, and you've invested in that, then my bet is you want them to be creative. So diligence in qualification is a key factor. And the values and standards that are applied, not just to qualification, but in a wider context, across not just sales, but other departments as well, some of whom I've called out, but right across the business, those values and standards need to be upheld from the top. From a sales point of view and a sales process point of view, that means paying attention to what's going on with the sales process, driving iterations, reviews, and improvements, and making sure that it is fit for purpose. It's not the CEO's job, but if it isn't driven from the top, it is unlikely to happen, and the downstream consequences will ultimately draw the CEO into the discussion. And I'm advocating that nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So there is a lot that we could have covered about sales process design. I've tried to steer away from the mechanics, and we've chosen to focus on the why and the role of the CEO in ensuring that the sales process supports continued sales creativity. John, if there's appetite, we could use another session to dive deeper into something around the process, methodology, procedures in the operation, different subjects. But for today, I think we should close there. And if, John, if you've picked up any questions as we've gone along, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, we'll call it a day.
Thanks, Wayne. That was excellent. Appreciate that. I think from my perspective, obviously working in sales, hiring, and recruitment, it's vital when dealing with an organisation that they do have an effective sales process in place, particularly when hiring salespeople, particularly strong and experienced salespeople. They are likely to want to know about the sales process, and they're going to expect something in place that they can plug into when they join.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair comment. I talked a little bit about behaviors and activities in the context of creativity. But yeah, John, you and I have talked about this a number of times in different projects. But when you're interviewing a top sales candidate, it would not surprise me if they were interested in how the sales operation is run, what the sales process looks like, not from an admin point of view, but they want to know the difference between great performance and average performance, and to have a picture of what that looks like for them when they're talking to their customers. They care. It's how they've been successful in the first place. And by the way, through their career, they're likely to have had good experiences and bad experiences. One of the reasons why you may choose not to hire someone from an established global Goliath into an early stage business is because they will be used to a hands-free sales process end to end, where they input whatever it is they have to input and nothing happens until they do. And the danger is that someone like that will land in your organization and that isn't how it's going to run. That needs to be understood. Equally, if you, it's very easy to find examples for these things and to support an argument. But in preparation, I was looking through notes of mine, and there was a report from the TAS group, who are well respected in this field. And they suggest that 70% of companies that follow a structured sales process would be considered high performing. And within those organizations, 70% of them could show business forecasts that were accurate as a result of that defined sales process and the operation of that process. Now, I can't talk to the validity or the profile of the contributors to that report, but there are numerous reports. Harvard Business Review reports on this regularly, and there are a number of sales and sales leadership industry organizations who will do the same, and their views are overwhelming. However, worth also pointing out that the Objective Management Group, OMG, report that 68% of salespeople do not follow a sales process. So that dynamic is quite startling, quite startling. So
it's high. That's really high.
It's high, right? And I think that there's no single answer. Just as I was very keen to point out, there's no single profile of a sales process. But viewed together and trying to understand how you hire great people, clearly there is a relationship between those topics.
That's great. Thank you, Wayne. I think we need to end it there. I'm conscious of the time, but if anyone does want to follow up, Wayne and my details are available at the beginning and the end of Wayne's presentation. There, feel free to reach out to either of us, even if you want a copy of the recording or you want a copy of the presentation itself. Then we'd be more than happy to help, or just want to have a chat and ask some follow-up questions. then please do let us know. But for now, really appreciate your time. Thank you again, Wayne.
Lovely, John. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.